There is a moment in the opening credits of The Dick Van Dyke Show where Rob Petrie walks through the front door of his New Rochelle home, rounds the corner of the living room, and trips over the ottoman in the middle of the floor. It happened in the first episode, and it became the show's signature image, a man coming home to the life he loves and immediately stumbling over it. For 5 seasons on CBS, from October 3, 1961 to June 1, 1966, fund 158 episodes, 15 Emmy Awards, The Dick Van Dyke Show was the most sophisticated situation comedy American network television had produced. It was the first show to depict the inner workings of a television comedy writing room. It treated its characters as adults whose intelligence the audience was expected to match. It made a working woman in a man's professional world, Sally Rogers, the only female writer on the Alan Brady Show staff, one of the central figures of a primetime ensemble, without once making her gender the punchline. Today, most of the people who made it are gone. Only 2 still remain. Their stories are worth knowing in full. Number 1 is Carl Reiner, who created the show, wrote many of its best episodes, played the unseen and then seen tyrannical Alan Brady, and whose fingerprints on American comedy stretch from Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows in the early 1950s to the last years of his life, in ways that make his contribution to the medium nearly impossible to measure in a single paragraph. He was born Carl Reiner on March 20, 1922, in the Bronx, New York, the son of a watchmaker. He served in the United States Army Air Forces during World War II, studied drama on the GI Bill, and joined Sid Caesar's writing room in the late 1940s, a room that also contained Mel Brooks, Neil Simon, Larry Gelbart, and Woody Allen, and that functioned as something close to a graduate seminar in American comedy craft. He was, by every account of the people who sat in that room, one of its 2 or 3 most significant voices. The Dick Van Dyke Show was his autobiography. Rob Petrie was a version of Carl Reiner, the comedy writer who balanced a marriage and a family in the suburbs with the creative pressures of a New York television production. When he first filmed a pilot called Head of the Family in 1960, he played Rob Petrie himself. CBS passed on it. Producer Sheldon Leonard suggested recasting the lead with an actor rather than the show's creator, and recommended Dick Van Dyke. The result was the most successful sitcom of the 1960s and the template for nearly every workplace comedy that followed it. What most viewers never knew is how consistently Reiner supported the careers of other performers throughout his life, often at the expense of his own visibility. He turned down offers to play Alan Brady as a series regular because he believed the show worked better with Brady as an absence, a force the other characters defined themselves against. He passed creative credit to collaborators when the credit was arguably his. He called in favors for performers he believed in. He was, by the accounts of everyone who knew him, the most generous creative mind in a room that tended to cultivate competitive instincts. After The Dick Van Dyke Show, Reiner directed some of the most commercially successful comedies of the next 2 decades. Oh God, The Jerk with Steve Martin, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, and The Man with 2 Brains among them. In his 80s and 90s, he became a beloved presence on social media, posting daily commentary on politics and culture with the precise timing of someone who had been writing comedy for 70 years. He and Mel Brooks had dinner together almost every night for the last decade of their friendship. Carl Reiner died on June 29, 2020, at his home in Beverly Hills, California, of natural causes. He was 98. His son Rob Reiner confirmed the death on Twitter that evening. He is buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. The man who invented one of the greatest television ensembles in history spent his last years posting at his laptop in Beverly Hills, still trying to make people laugh, still succeeding. Number 2 is Mary Tyler Moore, who played Laura Petrie, Rob's wife, the dancer turned suburban housewife, in the capri pants that CBS executives initially tried to ban from the show, and whose performance across 5 seasons quietly dismantled every assumption American television had made about what a married woman on a sitcom was allowed to be. She was born Mary Tyler Moore on December 29, 1936, in Brooklyn, New York. Her family was Irish Catholic. Her childhood was spent in Flatbush and then in Los Angeles, and her early career was built almost entirely on her legs. She spent several seasons as a dancing elf named Happy Hotpoint in appliance commercials on the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, visible only from the knees down. She was a trained dancer before she was an actress, and the physical precision that training gave her was the foundation of everything she built. Laura Petrie was written as a more intelligent and more emotionally complex woman than television wives of the early 1960s were typically permitted to be. She had opinions, she disagreed with her husband, and was sometimes right. She cried. cried, which the network initially resisted because television wives were not supposed to cry, until Moore made the crying so funny and so human that resistance became pointless. The capri pants, which CBS felt were too revealing for a housewife character, she wore anyway. The combination of warmth, wit, and a kind of precise emotional honesty made Laura Petrie the template for every television wife who came after her. What most viewers never knew is the sustained difficulty of Moore's private life underneath the public warmth. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 33 in 1969, shortly after a miscarriage. The diagnosis came after a routine blood test showed her blood glucose level was nearly 10 times the healthy range. Her doctors, she said, could not understand how she was still walking around. She managed the disease for the rest of her life, becoming the international chairperson of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation in using her celebrity to raise funds and awareness for decades. Her son Richie, her only child, died of an accidental gunshot wound in 1980 while cleaning his weapons. He was 24. The loss, Moore later said, was something she survived rather than recovered from. She wrote about her alcoholism publicly in her 1995 memoir, After All. She wrote about the diabetes in a 2009 book called Growing Up Again. In 2011, she had surgery to remove a benign brain tumor. By 2014, friends were reporting that she had serious heart and kidney problems and was nearly blind from complications of her diabetes. She had been hospitalized at Greenwich Hospital in Connecticut in January 2017, placed on a respirator, and died on January 25th of cardiopulmonary arrest, complicated by aspiration pneumonia. She was 80 years old. Her husband of 33 years, cardiologist Robert Levine, was with her. She is buried at Oak Lawn Cemetery in Fairfield, Connecticut, where she had lived in her later years. The woman who turned the world on with her smile, as her Mary Tyler Moore Show theme would later put it, had spent the years after that smile was most visible, fighting privately for her health, her sobriety, and her peace of mind, and doing so with the same precision she brought to everything else. But before we reach the show's next departure, there is something that deserves to be said about what this ensemble actually was. The Dick Van Dyke Show was produced on the Desilu lot, the same studio where I Love Lucy was made, and it inherited some of the technical innovation that Desilu had introduced. But what it brought that was genuinely new was the idea that a sitcom's characters could be funny because they were smart, not because they were foolish, not because they kept making the same avoidable mistake, but because intelligence, applied to the wrong situation with the wrong timing, produces comedy that is both sharper and more forgiving than any other kind. The writing room scenes are the best evidence. 3 professional writers trying to generate jokes for a variety show, and their professional competence making them no more able to control the results than anyone else. That was Carl Reiner's insight. That was the show. If these stories mean something to you, please subscribe. Every detail in this script was verified. Your subscription keeps this channel going. Number 3 is Rose Marie, who played Sally Rogers, the sole female comedy writer on the Alan Brady Show staff, the most professionally competent person in the writing room, the woman who was searching for a husband with a persistence that the show played as comedy and that concealed, in Rose Marie's performance, something real. She was born Rose Marie Mazzetta on August 15, 1923, in Manhattan, New York, to an Italian vaudeville actor father and a Polish-American mother. By age 3, she was performing. By age 5, she had a 7-year radio contract and was a star on the NBC radio network under the name Baby Rose Marie. By age 10, she had appeared in talking films with W.C. Fields. By age 11, she had known Morey Amsterdam, her future Dick Van Dyke Show co-star, for 2 years. Her career began before talkies were fully established and was still active 90 years later. What most viewers never knew is the grief Rose Marie carried for most of her adult life. Her husband, trumpeter Bobby Guy, died suddenly of a perforated peptic ulcer on December 5, 1964, while the show was in its 4th season. He was 41 years old. They had been married for 16 years. Rose Marie wore black for the rest of her life, not as a public mourning statement, but as a private one, a decision she maintained until her death. She never remarried. She raised their daughter Georgiana alone. When she spoke about Bobby Guy in later interviews, the grief was still present and unmitigated. She was nominated for 3 Emmy Awards for her work on The Dick Van Dyke Show. She was a co-headliner on opening night at Bugsy Siegel's Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas in 1946. She was a regular on Hollywood Squares. She appeared on The Garfield Show at age 90, doing voiceover work. A documentary about her career, Wait for Your Laugh, was released in 2017 and included interviews with Carl Reiner and Dick Van Dyke speaking about the magnitude of what she had built. The documentary came out the same year she died. Rosemary died on December 28, 2017, at her Los Angeles area home. She was 94. A caretaker found her not breathing. The cause of death was not immediately specified. Carl Reiner posted on Twitter, "There's never been a more engaging and multi-talented performer. In a span of 90 years, since she was 4, Dear Rosie performed on radio, in vaudeville, nightclubs, films, TV, and Vegas, and always had audiences clamoring for more. Her burial location has not been publicly documented. Heaven, as her website put it that day, just got a whole lot funnier." Number 4 is Morey Amsterdam, who played Buddy Sorrell, the comedy writing room's designated joke machine, the man who could produce a one-liner in response to any provocation in under 2 seconds, and whose rapport with Rosemary's Sally Rogers was one of the show's most reliable engines. He was born Morey Amsterdam on December 14, 1908, in Chicago, Illinois. He was a professional comedian, cellist, and songwriter before television, building a career in the clubs and on radio that predated the medium his most famous work would eventually appear in. He and Rosemary had known each other since she was 9 years old. Their friendship predated the show by more than 30 years and gave their on-screen partnership a depth that the scripts alone could not have manufactured. What most viewers never knew is that Amsterdam wrote the words to the song Rum and Coca-Cola, which became one of the best-selling recordings of 1945 as performed by the Andrews Sisters. The song's ownership was subsequently disputed, and the case became one of the more significant music copyright disputes of the post-war era. He was also the author of Keep Laughing, a humor anthology. He was, away from the camera, a working intellectual in comedy who took the craft seriously in a way that his Buddy Sorrell persona, all reflex and surface, was designed to conceal. Morey Amsterdam died on October 28, 1996, in Los Angeles, California, of heart failure. He was 87. His burial location is Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. He and Rosemary did a guest spot together on the sitcom Caroline in the City just months before his death. The two friends, in their 70s and 80s, still finding the same rhythm they had discovered on the Desilu lot 3 decades earlier. Number 5 is Richard Deacon, who played Mel Cooley, the show's producer, the beleaguered straight man, the bald and perpetually suffering recipient of Buddy Sorrell's most withering one-liners, and who was, by most accounts of the people who worked with him, the most straightforwardly kind person on the set. He was born Richard Deacon on May 14, 1921, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He served in the United States Navy during World War II, studied acting, and built a career as a character actor, whose recognizable face and dry delivery made him one of the most reliably employed supporting performers in 1950s and 1960s television. His Mel Cooley was structurally the show's punching bag, the character who existed to absorb Buddy's insults and whose suffering the audience was encouraged to enjoy, and Deacon played him with a dignity that made the character's discomfort genuinely funny, rather than simply mean. After the Dick Van Dyke Show ended in 1966, Deacon continued working in television through the 1970s and early 1980s, appearing in The Mothers-in-Law and other series. He also became a noted cook and food writer, publishing a cookbook called The Hollow Leg. He died of a heart attack on August 8, 1984, at his home in Los Angeles, California. He was 63, the youngest principal cast member to die, and the first to go. His burial location is Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills. The straight man of the most sophisticated comedy ensemble in American television history left before most of his co-stars knew how much they would miss him. Number 6 is Dick Van Dyke, who played Rob Petrie, who turned 100 on December 13, 2025, and who is alive in July 2026. Still working, still here, the most durable figure in a cast of exceptional durability. He was born Richard Wayne Van Dyke on December 13, 1925, in West Plains, Missouri. He served in the United States Army Air Forces during World War II, working as a radio announcer after initially failing the flight physical, and built his performing career in the post-war years. Mime work with a partner named Phil Erickson, nightclub performances, radio, and eventually television. By 1960, he was starring on Broadway in Bye Bye Birdie, winning the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical. By 1961, The Dick Van Dyke Show had made him the most beloved comic performer on American television. By 1964, Mary Poppins had made him a global film star. What most viewers never knew is that Van Dyke is severely dyslexic, a learning difference he concealed throughout his entire career because he was too ashamed to name it, and that he eventually addressed publicly by writing a series of children's books about a dyslexic boy named Hank Zipser alongside author Lynn Oliver. He has said that writing those books was one of the most personally important things he ever did. He also fought alcoholism for years, checking into a hospital in 1972 for 3 weeks of treatment, and has been sober since. He was a heavy smoker for most of his adult life. He gave that up too. His film career after Mary Poppins included Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, The Comic, and Dick Tracy. His television career included the new Dick Van Dyke Show, Diagnosis Murder, and a 6-episode arc on Days of Our Lives in 2023, for which he won a Daytime Emmy Award at age 97, becoming the oldest person ever to win that honor. In 2024, at age 98, he appeared in a Coldplay music video. He married Arlene Silver, a makeup artist 46 years his junior, on February 29, 2012, at age 86. They have been together for nearly 20 years. He told People magazine in November 2025, on the eve of his 100th birthday, "I've been in what I can only describe as a full-on bear hug with the experience of living. Being alive has been doing life, not like a job, but rather like a giant playground." Number 7 is Larry Matthews, who played Richie Petrie, Rob and Laura's son, the boy who grew up across 5 seasons in the New Rochelle house, and who is alive in 2026 at age 70, the youngest member of the original cast, and, alongside Van Dyke, the only other survivor. He was born on August 15, 1955, and was 6 years old when the show began. His character's full name, Richard Robert Oscar Sam Edward Benjamin Ulysses David Petrie, concealed the acronym Rosebud, a winking reference to Citizen Kane that most viewers in 1961 did not notice, and that the show's writers placed there for their own quiet amusement. After the show ended in 1966, Matthews made only a handful of additional acting appearances and eventually stepped away from the industry. He reprised Richie Petrie in the 2004 reunion special, The Dick Van Dyke Show Revisited. He has described his time on the set as feeling like home, a family, not a production. He lives quietly. He is 70 years old. He is the youngest face from the New Rochelle living room, and he is still here. They ended up scattered across the city. The show was filmed in and the Connecticut home of the woman who made Laura Petrie possible. Carl Reiner is at Westwood Village Memorial Park, near the industry he helped build. Mary Tyler Moore is at Oak Lawn Cemetery in Fairfield, in the state where she spent her last years. Rose Marie is in an undocumented location in Los Angeles. Her husband still mourned, her black clothes still part of how people remember her. Morey Amsterdam and Richard Deacon are both at Forest Lawn, the Joke Machine and the Straight Man, in the same cemetery. A geography buddy Sorrell would have turned into a punchline within seconds, and 2 of them are still here. Dick Van Dyke at 100, in a full-on bear hug with living. Larry Matthews at 70, quietly, in the life he chose when the cameras went off. The ottoman is still in the middle of the floor. He still trips over it every time. If these stories meant something to you, leave a comment below. Tell me which one hit hardest. I read every reply.